Hello, Gary Stearman with another edition of Prophecy in the News. Today we're going to discuss this book. It's called Forbidden Gates, and the author, Tom Horn, is with us today, so stay tuned. Well, it's a pleasure once again to have Tom Horn with us. Tom, welcome to Prophecy in the News.
Yeah, well, Gary, it's great to be with you again.
And it's a pleasure to be able to offer another one of your great books, Forbidden Gates. You know, this has a rather forbidding little bit of cover art. It has an eye, and it's not a very friendly eye staring off the cover of the book. What's Forbidden Gates all about?
Well, Forbidden Gates, and one thing I should add right away is that my wife actually co-authored this book with me, so it's by Thomas and Nita Horn.
I'm sorry, I should have said that, but I didn't, and I'm glad you quickly corrected me.
Well, she put the softer side of Sears in there for me, you know,
okay.
Kind of bring me back down to earth. Well, Forbidden Gates, the idea that a portal might be opened, a pathway, that in the fall of man and perhaps even during the days of Noah, that there are things that God put an end to, a relationship that he closed off. This could include portions of our mind that function for what we don't know, portions that are closed off now. But the big idea behind the book is that technology now is poised to change all of that and potentially even to reopen those doorways. As we talk about transhumanism and transhumanists, people watching this show will learn that there are those who think we can open new modes of perception, but are they old modes of perception?
Yeah. Now, Tom just used a term, transhumanism, and we're going to be spending quite a bit of time explaining what that is and why it is of interest to you as a Christian. Before that, I want to just kind of backtrack a little bit. You spent many years as a pastor, and you are a Bible teacher, pastor. You believe Scripture to be true in its original autographs. You, I know, are a faithful follower of the Lord Jesus Christ. You are what could be called a classic Christian in every sense of the word. And yet, in recent years, and I'm not sure how far back, the Lord kind of opened your eyes to some things, and He's taken you along a different path, and you have a message for Christians, but it's not the conventional message that people are hearing in church.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Gary, I have no idea how I wound up where I am, except that I can trace back to some years ago. I was actually writing an article on the history of Halloween for one of your largest newspapers here in the state of Oklahoma.
Oh, really?
That's what I was doing.
Okay.
I was doing research, and I came across a term called transgenics. I had never heard the term before. This is probably 15 years ago now, but I got the idea. Trans, genes, we're talking here something about altering genetic structures, and I was anxious to learn more about it. What did it mean? Well, I found out, you know, that was kind of the first early cookie cutter stage of genetic engineering, where you use a petri dish and you try to mix the genetics of one creature with another creature and you create a hybrid form. It's far more sophisticated than that now, but it simply put me on this path, and just out of being curious George, wanting to know what that meant, it then led me to wondering if there wasn't something prophetic about this, because the further I dug into it, the more it felt like we were repeating something that had happened once, not only according to my interpretation of ancient biblical scripture, but around the world. This story in every culture of these superintelligences who came down and mingled the DNA of animals with humans and even plant life.
And Tom is talking about Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Josephus says those men of renown are the Greek heroes, the Titans and the Olympians.
Right.
One and the same. And Greek history says that the Titans and the Olympians actually existed. Superhuman creatures who were not very moral or ethical or kind to humanity, and that they were destroyed in ancient days. Well, interestingly, the Bible says that the flood destroyed them, and so so you have Greek history and the Bible following the same line. It's amazing when you go into secular Greek history how often a flood is mentioned, which destroyed an old race that had become utterly decadent. And you have mentioned to me in the past that you didn't start out believing this. You used to be a classic Bible teacher who taught that Genesis 6:4 was talking about the sons of Seth.
Right. And frankly, I just had to be honest. I remember the first time that my brother-in-law brought me, I think it was some tapes by Noah Hutchings or something talking about these giants, you know.
Yes.
And that the angels came down and married to women, and out of that came the Nephilim, the giants. And I just thought that was the most terrible theology. But being honest, and just over a long period of time, and actually evaluating all of the ancient supportive texts, the pseudepigraphical, the apocryphal, and then the biblical being the authority, and then even watching how in the history of the church, how it was a political embarrassment, in essence, to the church for them to be talking about angels marrying women, and they were moving towards what they thought was an enlightened era, and they were going to be preferring science over theology and whatever.
Yes.
But there were pressures, and so they came up with this idea that Genesis 6:4 was talking about the sons of Seth, but in fact it was simply an invention of men. All of the ancient records, all of the ancient fathers. This is the reason why Jude and Peter both quote the book of 1 Enoch in the New Testament, referring to those angels which kept not their estate, and now they've been locked up in everlasting chains of darkness, waiting the judgment. The Nephilim, the giants, came out of that. So, and then, as you mentioned, like with the Greek Titans, or Gilgamesh of the Sumerians, there is this tale of these beings who wanted to become immortalized. They wanted to become godlike in bodies constituted on earth, and this led to judgment and the flood.
And Jesus himself said that as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man, which is yet future to us. And as we think about this, we think, is that really true? Will the world in our future revisit those ancient abominations? And I think that Tom presents a very good case for the fact that that will indeed be true, and in fact is right now. You mentioned science in its pride and in conformity with the higher forms of the Christian religion, kind of united and adopted the evolutionary model, adopted the scientific method, and was kind of embarrassed by the thought that those old superstitions could actually be true. But Tom, in the last 8-9 decades, science has become religion, and it is today. And it has become religion with teeth, because now science actually has the ability to begin to do what the old gods were causing to happen before the flood. And that's what your book's all about.
Yes, and that we've entered an age now where we're no longer afraid to play God. You know, this was Luciferian in the beginning. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will be like the Most High. It was that kind of a spirit that caused these angels to descend to the earth, though they knew they would face judgment, to create a different kind of man into which they could extend themselves, the Nephilim. But now look at what we're doing today. The whole idea behind transhumanism, which we mentioned at the beginning of this show, is that we now have the sciences, the tools to genetically re-engineer our species to create Homo sapien 2.0, techno-sapiens, a superior man. And for whatever reason, we've entered into an age where our older Christian Judeo-ethics no longer restrain the scientific mindset. Now we say we will be like God. We will be like the Most High, but even more so, because what transhumanism says is we can build a better model than the one we have now. The one God made is inferior to the version that we can create.
And all of this proceeds out of the evolutionary hypothesis, which for a long time was rather harmless. I mean, if you don't have the scientific means to tinker with genes, it's kind of a harmless sort of madness to believe in evolution. But on the other hand, in the 50s, with Crick and Watson discovering DNA, and then later science discovering how to manipulate DNA, suddenly it's not so harmless anymore to believe in evolution, because now you say, I can help evolution along to the next stage. That scares me to death, Tom.
But that is what is being said, and people need to understand that this is not a fringe group. The cultural movement. Now, you could date transhumanism back to Gilgamesh. You could date it to the Enlightenment era. You could date it to those periods of time. But when I speak of transhumanism, I'm talking about the popular cultural movement of today, which began about the time that we mapped the human genome.
Yes.
And then we started perfecting some of the early versions of genetic sciences. Now we're talking about germline engineering, where we literally can change at the sperm level, at the egg level, the genetics of a human. And the danger of germline engineering is every generation following that creation will be altered accordingly. So we're talking about a science that has now brought us to the point that we can permanently alter the human genotype, and the interest to do it reaches from national laboratories to military think tanks to the governments of the world now.
What might we do? Now, we could talk about creating a super soldier. That's been spoken of for a long time. What else are they talking about doing?
Well, for instance, I would venture to say that the average listener to this show is unaware that in 2006, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services gave $773,000 to Professor Maxwell Melman, who is a transhumanist. He's also a bioethicist at Case Law School in Cleveland, Ohio, for one purpose, and that is to take a team of lawyers, bioethicists, and scientists over a 24-month period to begin setting the guidelines to answer the question you just asked. How far, how different, in what ways might we enhance and alter our species? What are the guidelines that ought to be set that are going to be used to set public policy? That is, in what legal ways will the Constitution or the Bill of Rights be extended to human non-humans, humans who are only partly what we once were, but now they're partly something else: monkey, ape, fish, zebra, synthetic organisms like the J. Venter Institute is working on. I would venture to say the average American is clueless that our taxpayer funded dollars are now flowing into government studies in order to actually establish the guidelines that are going to lead to what they're calling the next step in human evolution, and that is human enhancement. We now have it within our control to take power over. We don't have to wait on the dawning task of natural evolution anymore. So we can, as much as we can imagine, answering your question is where we will go. And that's the reason why transhumanism is only seen as the first step towards what they call post-humanism, beings that are so radically different than what we are today as to no longer even be considered to be human.
All right, Tom, a singularity. That's a term that I really hadn't associated with transhumanism.
Yeah, singularity, and those who believe that we are moving towards a technological singularity, often known as singularitarians. And there's even a religion, there's an emerging religion now based around singularitarianism.
It's possible to be a singularitarian.
That's right.
Wow. Okay.
That's right. Of course, we take this term from science and black holes, the idea that as you move towards the horizon event of a black hole, you reach singularity, where everything that's even understood about physics begins to alter, begins to change, becomes something different. And people who ascribe to technological singularity, what they're really talking about is the moment when artificial intelligence comes online. That's going to be the trigger for technological singularity, is that an artificial mind, trillions of times more intelligent, faster, more powerful than humans are, is going to come online. It'll be able to reason, it'll be able to think, it'll begin solving all of man's problems essentially overnight. That's the singularity. That's the moment when we are going to awake to the event horizon that changes everything we have ever known or even been able to conceive in our wildest dreams about technology and how, of course, that's going to affect us as a species.
Crossing an event horizon, and I might add, from which there may be no return, but that's another story. Now, associated with the idea of a singularity or singularitarianism, you've also got another fancy word that I heard you use, Artilect.
Yes.
Tell us about the Artilect. Who coined the term? What's being spoken of here?
Right. And one thing, a caveat that I should add as we're talking about all this science, is that the real purpose behind writing this book was to alert the church as to how technology is going to alter the game plan around spiritual warfare and the pressures that this is going to put on homes and children who want to be enhanced in the not too distant future. Many experts saying just following the year 2012 is going to give birth, these are government reports, give birth to the human enhancement revolution. So all of this is coming. We want the church, Christians, to be prepared for it, to be educated to know what to do about it.
Wow, you know, that's a sinister thought. If the next door neighbor's kids have been genetically enhanced to do better in school, why not my Johnny and Mary? Because the only way they'll be able to keep up is if they are enhanced as well, right?
Right, that's right. And so some of the pressures are going to come not just from without, but from within our own homes. You know, parents struggle to raise their children in today's age anyway, with all the pressures and that they experience in public school. Well, what happens now when Sally comes home and can't understand why you still haven't bought the H+ magazine articles, the television, even your medical doctor telling you that it'd be better for your children to be enhanced? And a decade down the road, having child welfare services stepped in because there's basic enhancement that now have become what ought to be a simple human right. And if you withhold this from your children, perhaps you're not being a good parent and your children get put into a foster home. It's an amazing age, and those are very simplistic things. There are far more complex issues. And to get back to answering your question about the Artilects, Ray Kurzweil, of course, is most associated with the term singularity, which is associated with giving birth to an artificial intelligence. There's another great thinker. He has dedicated his entire adult life to the creation of an artificial intelligence or an artificial brain, and that is Professor Hugo de Garis. But he prefers the term Artilect, which means artificial intellect. But in both cases, he humanizes his more, and in order to write the book, Forbidden Gates, I had been familiar with his theories for a long time, and I'd read many of the journal articles that interviewed him, that sort of thing. I finally made myself, though, go back and read his book, The Artilect War, Cosmos versus Terrans. Two more words you have to familiarize yourself with. But a cosmos is simply those who will support the creation of an artificial intelligence even though they know it could lead to the extinction of mankind.
Wow.
Terrans, on the other hand, are probably guys more like me and you, and Terran is from terra, of the earth, terrestrial. We want to maintain our humanity. We want to maintain a certain control over the environmental structure on which God has placed us here on terra firma. But what Hugo de Garis believes, and he himself considers himself a cosmos or a transhuman.
Yes.
He supports this creation, but he talks about how he will go to bed at night having just these euphoric feelings about these, and he uses language like this, these godlike intellects that we are creating, that we are working on, that we are right now on the cusp of the final breakthrough that will give birth to the Artilects. And he'll be thinking of it in euphoric terms, but then he'll fall asleep. And he says he'll wake up in the middle of the night, jerked from bed in a horrific nightmare in which he has seen all of his descendants and all of humanity swimming in a sea of blood and destruction at the hands of these artificial intelligences. So his book, The Artilect War, Cosmos versus Terrans, is his own way of almost sounding like an Old Testament prophet, in which he's talking about a future moment in time when anti-human forces are going to conspire against human forces and ultimately lead to World War II. And Hugo de Garis is qualified to make these kind of predictions from a humanistic transhumanistic and even scientific point of view, and his theory is that we are leading towards World War III, a civil conflict in which literally billions of people will die before the end of the 21st century as a result of the creation of artificial intelligence.
You know, I'm sitting here trying to take all this in. It just sounds like a science fiction plot, and yet you know and I know, and we've both read on the subject, that there are serious researchers right now who are highly funded, and their goal is to create a superhuman.
And there's also those in the highest think tank at the U.S. Pentagon, the Jasons. There was material that was leaked from them. Wired magazine picked it up and wrote an article called The Jason's Fear, Brain-Modified Foes. But what they were talking about is how that we are in a position now where this is the next arms race. It has to be, because our foes are already working on this technology. They won't be restrained by our Western ideas about ethics and Christianity and anything else. And if they develop this technology ahead of us, they will use us to subjugate us to their will. There was a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing in California just a few months ago. It was chaired by Democrat Brad Sherman. He was picked because he's an expert on the spread of weapons of mass destruction among terrorists. But guess what this HFA hearing was about? It was about future terrorism perpetrated by transhumans. Mark Stensel, who's a writer for the Congressional Quarterly, attended the HFA hearings, came back and wrote an editorial called Genes Without Borders. And he used the same phrase you just did. He said attending this event was like listening to a Hollywood pitch for a sci-fi movie with its discussion of superhumans, superintelligence, and super animals that in the near future will be a lethal force against which we are not prepared. Well, the U.S. military, DARPA, our think tanks, they are very much taking this into account. And Forbidden Gates provides chapters. We also send you to the links where you can download the science reports for yourself and what they're saying. We photocopied copies out of DARPA's 2011 presidential budget, that shows where they're talking about. They're editing soldier DNA. So now what has been on the drawing board for a long time is poised to start rolling out.
You know, as Jesus said, and we come back again and again to this verse, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man, meaning as it was in the days of Noah, with all those horrific interventions upon the human race that threatened to destroy the human race. Jesus said that very same situation would exist again. And I sit here listening to you. You're documenting this fact. You want to know what Tom's been driving at, and you want to know about it in detail. Read this book. It's called Forbidden Gates. Tom and his wife Nita, Tom and Nita Horn, have put this book together for you, the Christian. You need to have your consciousness roused. It's possible that there will be legislation in the future that you'll get a chance to have some influence on. Maybe you'll be able to stand up in your church and provide a sane and lucid answer to somebody who's frightened to death of something they've just heard about. This book will kind of give you an advance notice of what's going on right now in the halls of science, falsely so called. It's called Forbidden Gates. Tom and Nita Horn, yours for $16.95 plus shipping and handling. Call the 800 number on your screen right now, and I think you'll really, really enjoy going through this book. You've seen just a sample of it with Tom's conversation here today. Tom, you've gone way, way deeper than this in the book.
We have. In fact, I don't know how much more time we have left for this show. You know that the Global Governance 2025, a critical juncture, was published by U.S. intelligence and European intelligence just this week.
Wow.
Just this week. They're talking about the future of global governance. On page 35, though, they start talking about direct modification of DNA at fertilization is widely researched, a goal of removing defective genes. However, discussions of future capabilities open the possibility for designing humans with unique physical, emotional, cognitive abilities. This is in the Office of the Director of National Institute for Intelligence for the United States. Report came out just this week.
Just this week.
That's how widespread this phenomenon already is.
Tom, we've got a little over a minute left. You're providing a warning in a way. You're standing up and shouting and saying, please take notice of this. What should people be watching for?
Well, at the website, it's singular, ForbiddenGate.com. We're providing all the government documents so they can see this for themselves. Furthermore, we have written a 13-week teacher's guide. If they want to take and break this down into classes in a church setting, they'll be able to do that. I want the watchers of your show, though, to realize that by watching this show, they're not going to be able to turn around and go and get this book from Amazon. We're doing something we've never done before. We're making this book available through you, Prophecy in the News, for 3 months before they'll be able to get this in a bookstore anywhere. So if they want to get it, they're going to have to get a hold of you.
Well, what can I say? That was a great plug, and I didn't expect that. But again, in just a few seconds that are left, Forbidden Gates is the book. Tom and Nita Horn, the authors, and you've gotten to know Tom Horn today. Tom, it's been a pleasure, as always, to talk with you. We love it.
Thank you, Gary.
And Tom is on the cutting edge of Bible prophecy, and I think that you're going to learn a lot when you read Forbidden Gates. Gary Stearman, reminding you, as always, to keep looking up. Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported ministry sponsored by our many friends across America and in your area. For your gift of $10, you can receive a special edition of our current program on an audio CD, or for a gift of $20, we'll send you our programs on DVD videos. For either order, call the 800 number on your screen right now.